You're looking at your website sales page or welcome sequence and thinking, it's been a while since I wrote this. Do I need to rewrite it? Well, the answer isn't always straightforward. I'm giving you a few guidelines on when you should rewrite versus revamp your copy so you don't waste time or money, but instead maximize conversions.
Being an online business owner is full of ups and downs. Some days you can't imagine going back to your 9 to 5, and other days you want to burn your whole business to the ground. We get it.
Welcome to Chaos to Conversions, a podcast of practical, no BS strategies to grow your online business. Each week, we're chatting about launching, copywriting, mindset, and more, so you can make sense of the chaos and do more of what works.
Join the conversation and let's grow together.
Welcome back to Chaos to Conversions. Today, I'm kind of going to do a quick little episode here about revamping versus rewriting. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot more recently as I've been kind of brainstorming some new offers in my business and also working with a lot of business owners in the Copy Huddle, which is my copy membership. So each week they're able to submit copy for an audit. And so I kind of started thinking about this aspect a bit more of like, when is that line between this needs to be rewritten versus this can be edited and revised and given new life, right, when it comes to our copy. And I know personally in my own business, recently I've been thinking a lot about my website. I don't love my website for a lot of different reasons, but the copy is one of those elements that I'm like, I feel like I'm at the point where I do need some sort of either rewrite or revamp. And I've been trying to figure out for myself, which of the two do I need? And what's the right strategy for me right now? So anyways, I want to walk you through kind of some guidelines if you are thinking about this in your business. Again, whether you're thinking about this for a sales page you have, an email sequence that you have, or some other element like a website, you can maybe make a better decision if you have some of these guidelines in mind. So first of all, I want to talk about why does it matter? Like, why do you need to decide, right? Like, why can't we just say all copies should be revamped or all copies should be rewritten? And there's a couple reasons why it matters and why you should take time to think about it before you just run in one direction. The first is time. Like, I think most of us are pretty limited on time, especially if, like me, you are a solopreneur kind of doing it all on your own. We don't have a lot of time, and so we have to use it really wisely. And rewriting is going to take more time most of the time than revamping. And so if the decision's really coming down to how much time do I have available, is it really worth me rewriting this? Like, is a rewrite really what I need? Because if not, okay, I can save myself some time then by just doing some revamping. Of course, revamping also does take time. And depending on what, again, you're revamping, that can also determine how much time it's going to take. But I still think it's worth kind of analyzing it from that perspective. Another reason it matters is because of money, especially if you are hiring someone to do the copywriting for you. It's typically going to cost way more for someone to rewrite something completely from scratch, or just write it from scratch rather than doing a revamp. So for example, something I've been playing around with in my business more is audits, people hiring me for audits, or hiring me to do like glow ups on their copy where I go in and make adjustments to the messaging and things like that. So obviously these glow ups and audits cost way less than me writing from scratch because it takes me way less time. I have a lot of copy already to work from. So that's another aspect. And then of course is the impact. You have to consider which one is going to make a bigger impact. Do you need to rewrite it in order to see the sales and conversions that you are wanting to see? Or is a revamp enough? So those are some things to think about when it comes to why it even matters. And then let's talk about the revamp versus the rewrite. So I'm going to start with revamping. And in my mind, what a revamp is you're using the bulk of the copy you already have existing. I don't want to put necessarily a percentage on it because I think it can really vary based on from project to project. But I would probably say like, I don't know, maybe 60 to 70%, possibly even more of the copy is remaining the same. What you're doing is you're going in and maybe changing some of the messaging, maybe changing some of the elements in the copy. So like dates, deliverables, and things like that. So again, depending on the type of copy that you are revamping or you're revising is how much you're going to change. If we're talking about like a simple email, like maybe a old email that you wrote last year and you just want to revamp it and send it out again to your email list, that might take you 5 minutes to do. But if we're talking about a whole sales page, that might take a couple days for you to do some revamps on, and you're probably going to change a larger percentage of it. Okay, so here's some guidelines to consider if you're thinking maybe this copy needs a revamp. So here's some things that I would think, yeah, you might be in the revamp category. When your offer has stayed the same, or at least mostly the same, right? So again, let's say that I have a product that I wrote about and sent an email to my list last year. And now I want to send the same email this year, and the product has stayed mostly the same. Maybe I haven't made any changes, and I just need to revamp some of the messaging or some of the like timeliness aspects of it. Or maybe I added like a bonus element to this offer, or I added like now it has a digitized version to the offer. And so I would just go through and add that. That would be a simple revamp, but essentially the offer has stayed mostly the same. Another reason you might lean towards doing a revamp is when you're seeing conversions on that piece of copy. So if when you send this copy out, you are seeing sales, you are seeing it convert to an action that you want them to take, and it's at the level that you're wanting it to, obviously within realistic terms. And Melanie is a great person to talk to about that if you're like, well, I don't know if I'm being realistic with my conversions. But let's say you're seeing like kind of the average conversion on like a sales page and you're happy with that, then maybe a revamp is something that you can consider. Another reason you might just stick with revamping your copy is when the world has stayed relatively the same. And this might seem like an interesting thing to put out there. But I believe I talked about this on another episode recently. Maybe I didn't. Maybe this is something I mentioned in an email. Who even knows anymore? But as the world changes and shifts, and 2025 has definitely been a very shifty place for the online business, world, as far as like what messaging is working well, what sales strategies are working really well. Things are definitely changing, and I think we're also trying to figure out like what is going to be working nowadays. So when the world has been changing a lot, when we're seeing a lot of economic unease, when we're seeing a lot of distrust in online businesses and things like that, it may be harder to do a revamp because there's just so many different elements in the messaging that need to change. Again, it's going to depend on the type of business that you have, the type of offer that you have, whether that impacts the copy at all, but it's just something to consider. If the world has stayed relatively the same, maybe there aren't any drastic big changes, maybe when the beginning of 2025 hit, you already were making changes to your messaging and copy because you knew things were about to get weird, then yeah, you might just continue to revise. Another reason you might revamp is when your audience has stayed relatively the same. So if you're still talking to the same people who are having the same struggles, the same problems, then yeah, you might just need a revamp. When the research you've collected backs up your current messaging and marketing, that a revamp definitely is probably a better option for you. So let's say you have an offer, you have like members or attendees that come into this offer, and you do like collect market research on them, whether that just be like reading testimonials or maybe they submit like some sort of onboarding survey. And every time that you're bringing new people in, the same types of problems are showing up. It's not like anything has drastically changed since you've been running this offer. Then yeah, you might not need to really go in and change a lot of the messaging pieces or the copy that you're currently sending out. A revamp also is good if you just need to make couple little tweaks. So like on the copy huddle, I had some changes happen last month with the copy huddle, just like things that I adjusted, new things I added, some things that I changed. And so right now with the sales page, I would just make tweaks to it. I wouldn't do like a huge overhaul. And then the last thing to consider is when there's been some sort of just minor adjustment to the offer. And I kind of talked about this a second ago, but again, if there's not any big changes, big overhauls to your offer, whether that be a digital product, a membership, a service, then a revamp might be the right choice. And as you might have noticed as I'm talking through this, is there's a lot of different things to consider. It's not like, oh, my offer stayed the same, check, okay, I'm just going to do a revamp. You're going to have to go through and think about all these things individually because your offer could have stayed the same, your audience could have stayed the same, but the world drastically changed, and therefore how people are spending has drastically changed, and therefore you might still need to be doing some sort of larger rewrite if the messaging is just really off. Or maybe you were seeing conversions perfectly fine last year and now you're not. So that might mean that maybe you do need to do a rewrite. So there are a lot of different elements here, and that's why I said kind of in the intro that it's not always straightforward. Sometimes it's a little more nuanced. And if you're kind of in between, like, do I do a rewrite or do I do a revamp? You might start with the revamp. And if it's still not, converting as you want it to, or it's still not working, then you might go for the rewrite. So, okay, let's talk specifically about the rewrite now. So, when we're talking about rewrite, this would mean like you're writing from scratch. So we're assuming that you've had some piece of copy that you have written that you previously used, again, whether this is your website, a sales page, a welcome sequence, and now you're wondering, or now you're considering just starting over and having a whole new piece of copy made. So when would you opt for a rewrite? So the first thing is when your when your messaging does need to be drastically altered. So kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier with like the world shifting in a big way. So lately, definitely the economy has been a big concern for a lot of people. Sales have been much slower. People are a little more like tentative with how they spend. They're much more cautious with how they spend. And it reminds me a lot of like when COVID happened in the pandemic. And a lot of my clients were in the TPT space kind of around that time. I wasn't actually doing like a lot of freelancing at that time, but I had a lot of clients come to me around like 2021, 2022, right? As I was moving into the freelance space. And a lot of them had adjusted their messaging, like maybe on their TPT store or on their sales pages with more like COVID type language, right? Like the world is uncertain. We have digital aspects. It's asynchronous, like all these things that we were using around that time. And then as we started moving away from some of those like pandemic jitters and some of our priorities changed when it came to buying. So like teachers, they weren't having to do all online classes anymore. Some of them, if anything, were like tired of having to do online classes. So offers and parts of an offer that might have been appealing before just weren't as appealing anymore. And so the messaging did need to shift and change. And that might have been a rewrite for them, especially if a lot of the messaging was based around like pandemic type language. So that would be a good example of what I mean when like the world is drastically altering and changing. Just considering that in your copy, because that is a part of marketing and it's something that we do need to think about whenever we are marketing, is what does the world look like? Another thing to consider when it comes to a rewrite. So when you're not seeing results from your current copy and you believe that the copy or the messaging is what's amiss. And this can be hard to do on your own because I think we are often so clouded with like what we see and what we interact with in our business every single day. And so you may need to have like a business friend step in or someone that you hire to do like an audit or something like that of your business or of your offer. But thinking about like the offer, right? Like you're not seeing results from that copy. Signs that the messaging might be amiss is like maybe you were getting a ton of people like showing interest and then all of a sudden that changed. Or maybe like you were seeing a ton of conversions and then that changed. Or maybe like when you're sitting down and you're like talking with people one-on-one, it's really easy for you to convert them and to sell them. But whenever they go to your sales page or your website, you're not seeing that same kind of result. Then it may be that the messaging or something with the copy is off or a little bit amiss. Of course, there are a lot of reasons that a sales page could not be converting. Maybe the price just isn't right. Maybe the offer doesn't include something that people really want. So we want to make sure we are doing market research and we're looking at a lot of different aspects of things to see if it is the copy portion. But a rewrite might be the best choice if it's just like the copy is what's not producing the results or is a big part of why your offer or sales are not where you want them to be. Another reason to do a rewrite is if your offer has undergone a really big change. So let's say maybe you had a program that previously was like a, do it yourself. You go in and you go through the modules on your own. And now it's undergone this huge shift where now it's actually group coaching and it's a lot more guided, much more hands-on. They get this one-on-one support. That would be probably a pretty drastic change. And because it's a pretty drastic change, it also might influence who is interested in that offer. And so therefore, a rewrite might be the best option. Another thing, or another guideline, I suppose, to kind of look at when you're thinking about rewriting is when your market research is reflecting different needs and struggles. So like I said, if you're doing onboarding surveys, if you're collecting market research regularly, if you're interacting with your audience, and maybe all of a sudden or maybe not all of a sudden, or slowly, but it's somewhere you start to notice that the needs and struggles have shifted. and your sales page, your email, your sequence, whatever it might be, is no longer reflecting the current needs and the current struggles. And it's enough of the messaging in that copy that you're like, yeah, we might just need a whole rewrite of this. Like, it's not something I can go in and just like fix this and fix a little this. It's really embedded in this copy, then a rewrite might be the best option. Another reason you might do a rewrite is if your brand voice or your business has pivoted a lot. So maybe you're now talking to a whole different audience. It's like the same offer, right? I'm still writing welcome sequences, but this time instead of writing them for former teachers, maybe I'm writing them for, I don't know, people in like real estate or like construction. It's probably a pretty big shift and pivot in my business that I might want to go through and just do a whole rewrite. Or if I've rebranded in some way and now my voice is very different, or how I'm like, therefore selling this might be very different. Okay, and the last thing to think about when it comes to rewrite is if it was written without strategy. That is another really big component that I think we don't often consider. And if the first time you sat down to write this welcome sequence or to write this sales page, and you were just kind of throwing words out there and hoping that they stuck, and maybe they were kind of converting, maybe you were kind of seeing some results, but overall there wasn't really any strategy behind it, it might be time to just do a rewrite and make sure that this time you are implementing a really great strategy, whether that be doing it on your own or hiring a copywriter to come in and do that strategy with you or for you. Might be really good options that you can see the actual potential when that strategy is implemented. Okay, so to do a quick recap, we talked about some reasons why you might need to sit down and think about a revamp versus a rewrite, and that's your time, money, and impact. And really, there is no straight answer to this. You're going to have to sit down and think about, is your, audience the same? Has their struggles and challenges shifted at all? Does your messaging need to adapt to current times and changes in the world? If you don't know, if you're like really stuck on this and you want someone to talk it through with, I'm happy to chat with you in the DMs, like not me trying to sell you something, just literally me trying to have a conversation with you. You can reach out at the Relevant Collective and we can just chat and see which one is the best option. If you do have an idea of whether you're leaning towards more rewrite or revamp and you do want support with that, I do have some offers that can help. So of course, most of the offers I have in my business are complete quote unquote rewrites. Typically I'm writing from scratch. So I have launch copy, I do sales pages and launch sequences. I also write email sequences like welcome sequences, abandoned cart sequences, and things like that. And I'm happy to do a rewrite for you. And along with those projects, I do market research so we make sure we're talking to your audience's specific struggles and needs. We're not throwing spaghetti at the wall. We have a strategy implemented. We know why we're writing what we're writing. Of course, I also do revamping. A big portion of that goes into my membership, the Copy Huddle. Like I said, they submit audits to me or copy to be audited each week. And so I'm helping them revamp existing copy that they've already written. But I also have some mini offers where I can go in and do audits as well, such as my launch copy glow up, where I will audit your current launch copy. And I'm also happy to just talk about any other audits or revamps that you have in mind so we can build a custom kind of proposal or project around that. So feel free to reach out again at the Relevant Collective or therelevantcollective.com. Thanks so much for joining the conversation today. If you want to learn more about how we can work together on email marketing, launch copy, or content planning, head to therelevantcollective.com. I'll meet you back here next Tuesday for more practical strategies to take your business from chaos to conversions.